The warlords ruled with an iron grip, their dominion spanning across the Andromeda expanse. No force had ever dared to challenge them, not truly. Entire civilizations had tried and failed, their fleets turned to drifting husks, their people enslaved or erased. Fear was their greatest weapon, more potent than any plasma rifle or dreadnought. It crushed rebellions before they could rise, turned enemies into obedient subjects before a single shot was fired. At the center of their power stood the High Council, 6 warlords who had carved their empires out of the bones of weaker species. They convened within the throne spire, a fortress of black stone and pulsating energy, built upon the ruins of a conquered world. Their meeting chamber was vast, its walls lined with trophies, helmets of fallen commanders, the broken remains of once feared war machines, the skulls of species erased from history. The warlords, each towering and monstrous in their own right, lounged upon their obsidian thrones. Vorik the Unyielding, the eldest and most ruthless of them, tapped his claws against the armrest, his crimson eyes narrowing. "Earth," he said, spitting the word as if it tasted foul. "A primitive rock, yet our scouts report they have begun resisting. Their fleets are laughable, their weapons archaic, but they refuse to kneel. Their defiance, however insignificant, is an insult." Across from him, Zyros the Hollow let out a mechanical chuckle, the sound grinding through the Vox speakers embedded in his armor. His organic body had long been consumed by cybernetic augmentation, leaving him more machine than flesh. A species that values defiance over survival is a species unworthy of existence. The others nodded in agreement. Arrogance had become their nature, their belief in their own invincibility absolute. Planets had burned for lesser infractions, and Earth would be no different. But then the message arrived. A pulse of static filled the chamber as the hollow projector ignited. The warlords turned their attention to the flickering image, a human clad in dark combat gear, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his helmet. His stance was relaxed, but there was no mistaking the deadly precision in his gaze. "My name is Lieutenant Commander David Kane," he said, his voice steady, unshaken. "Former Navy SEAL, currently acting alone. I know who you are. I know what you've done, and I'm here to tell you that your reign is over." Silence followed, then laughter. Vorik's guttural chuckle rolled through the chamber, soon joined by the others. The idea was absurd, one human against them, against an empire that had torn through the greatest militaries the galaxy had ever known. It was madness. Kane remained unmoving, his expression unreadable. I expected that reaction. Every tyrant laughs before they fall. The laughter faded. A flicker of uncertainty passed through the warlords, so brief it could have been imagined. Vorik leaned forward. "You are either the most foolish creature in existence, or you possess something we have yet to understand." "I possess the only thing you've never faced," Kane said. "An enemy you can't intimidate." The hollow projector cut out, leaving the chamber in heavy silence. For the first time in centuries, the warlords did not know whether to scoff or consider the implications. Zyros's metallic fingers flexed, his neural processors running rapid calculations. This could be a diversion, a trick meant to bait us into overreacting. Vorik exhaled sharply, dismissing the idea. "It doesn't matter. If he comes, we will make an example of him. One human is nothing." The others agreed. A lone soldier could not challenge the might of an empire. Their forces had decimated entire worlds. Their fleets blotted out stars. What was one man compared to that? But deep within the recesses of their war-hardened minds, a seed of unease had been planted. They had conquered countless civilizations, but those civilizations had always known fear. They had always submitted in the end. This human, this Kane, his eyes had not held fear. That was new, and new things had a way of becoming dangerous. The warlords had expected a fleet, an army, a desperate coalition of human forces throwing themselves into the maw of an unwinnable battle. What they got instead was a single ship, small, sleek, cutting through the void like a blade. It bypassed their outer defenses with ease, slipping through their security nets undetected. By the time the alarms screamed through the throne spire, the vessel had already landed. Kane stepped onto the warlord's world, as if he belonged there. He moved with the unhurried precision of a man who had long since abandoned the concept of fear. His armor, matte black and stripped of insignia, absorbed the cold, artificial light of the docking bay. No weapons were visible, but his every step carried the presence of a man who was himself a weapon. A squad of enforcers waited, towering brutes clad in heavy plating, rifles raised. Their commander, a scaled brute with obsidian plating grafted into his flesh, stepped forward, sneering down at him. "You will surrender," the enforcer growled. Kane tilted his head slightly, as if considering the words. Then he moved. The enforcer barely had time to register the shift before Kane's hand shot up, gripping the barrel of the nearest rifle. A twist, a sharp jerk, and the weapon was wrenched free, its stock slamming into the enforcer's throat. A shot rang out. One of the soldiers fired in reflex, but Kane had already pivoted, using the first body as a shield. The bolt of plasma burned through armor, flesh, and bone that wasn't his. A second shot, then a third. Kane dropped the lifeless corpse and surged forward. Close quarters combat was an art form, and he was its master. He wove between them, striking with a brutality that was neither showy nor excessive. The kind of efficiency that spoke of countless repetitions, thousands of hours of training honed on real battlefields. By the time the last enforcer hit the ground, the fight had lasted fewer than 10 seconds. Kane exhaled slowly, stepping over the bodies, his boots echoing against the steel floor. He had learned long ago that fear was not just about killing. It was about demonstrating, in undeniable terms, that resistance was meaningless. The surviving enforcers, who had watched from a distance, turned and ran. He let them. The corridors of the throne spire stretched before him, each one leading deeper into the stronghold. He moved through them like a shadow, silent, methodical. Surveillance drones hovered in the corners, their mechanical eyes whirring as they tracked him. He ignored them. Let the warlords watch. Let them see what was coming for them. He reached the inner sanctum without further interruption. Massive doors loomed before him, their surfaces carved with the history of the warlords' conquests. Entire civilizations reduced to mere etchings, victories immortalized in metal. Kane placed his palm against the cold steel and pushed. The doors groaned open. Inside, the warlords stood waiting. 6 of them, each distinct in form but identical in arrogance. Vorik, the leader, sat upon his throne, watching Kane with something almost resembling amusement. The others were less composed. Zyros, the machine warlord, tilted his head in calculated analysis. The others shifted, some gripping the hilts of weapons, others simply studying him, trying to understand how one man had walked so far into the heart of their empire unscathed. Kane took another step inside, his posture loose, easy. "I was expecting a warmer welcome," he said. Vorik leaned forward, resting his massive hands on his knees. "You have walked into the mouth of the beast, human. Do you truly believe you will walk out again?" Kane smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I didn't come to walk out." A pause. Then Vorik's laughter, deep and guttural, rolling through the chamber like distant thunder. "Bold. You think yourself a conqueror. Then? That you can do what no army has done." Kane shook his head. "I'm not here to conquer. I'm here to end you." Zyros clicked his metallic fingers together, a sharp, rhythmic sound. "You misunderstand the scale of your situation, human. You are a single soldier. We have entire fleets at our command. You are alone." Kane's gaze flicked to him. "Alone is what I do best." Vorik's amusement dimmed, just slightly. The warlord gestured, and the guards flanking the room stepped forward. Towering creatures, bred for war, each carrying weapons that could burn through steel. Kane did not move as they closed in. "The galaxy has always belonged to those strong enough to rule it," Vorik said. "You, human, are nothing more than an anomaly, a momentary distraction. Do you truly believe you can kill us all?" Kane looked up at him, and for the first time since stepping onto this world, his expression shifted. Not anger, not fear, something far worse. Certainty. He moved. faster than any of them expected, faster than was possible. The first guard raised his weapon. Cain was already on him. A sharp twist, snapping the warbeast's arm before the trigger could be pulled. He seized the weapon midair, turned, fired. The second guard staggered back, his chest cavity reduced to molten slag. Chaos erupted. The warlords rose, some drawing weapons, others summoning energy fields around them. Zyros flicked his wrist, and the floor erupted with automated turrets, each one locking onto Cain. Plasma fire filled the room. Cain was already moving. He hit the ground, rolling beneath the first barrage. A flick of his wrist, and a compact device detached from his armor, landing between the turrets. An instant later, an electromagnetic pulse rippled outward, shorting their targeting systems. Cain surged forward, closing the distance between himself and the nearest warlord, a hulking brute with 4 arms and serrated tusks. A blade flashed. The warlord's roar turned into a gurgle as Cain's knife drove up beneath his chin, severing vital arteries. Zyros moved next, his augmented limbs unfolding into a dozen razor-sharp appendages. "You are an impressive anomaly," he admitted, his mechanical voice devoid of emotion. "But an anomaly is still an error to be corrected." Cain didn't answer. He launched himself forward, a blur of motion and violence. From his throne, Vorik watched, his fingers tightening on the armrests. The laughter was gone now, replaced with something else. Something he had never felt before. A slow, creeping realization. The fight was not going as it should have. This human was not dying. This human was winning. Zyros struck with the precision of a machine, his bladed appendages slicing through the air faster than the human eye could track. He had fought countless enemies, dissected entire battlefields with cold, calculated efficiency. Against any other opponent, his strikes would have been absolute. Cain evaded them all. He twisted, sidestepped, redirected. The first blade swept past his throat by less than an inch. The second he caught mid-strike, twisting Zyros' limb in a way it was never meant to bend. Servo motors whined in protest as Cain yanked, driving his knee into the warlord's chest and sending him staggering backward. Vorik rose from his throne, watching as Cain closed the distance with the others. The human moved like a phantom, his strikes precise, each motion a deadly equation calculated to eliminate wasted effort. One warlord fell, Cain's blade buried in his throat. Another staggered back, clutching a ruined eye socket as blood gushed through his fingers. It was impossible. A single warrior should not have been able to do this. Vorik's mind raced. His empire had conquered entire systems, crushed species that had fought with desperation and fury. But none of them had fought like this. None of them had looked death in the face and welcomed it, weaponized it. Cain was something different. The realization unsettled him. A guttural roar erupted from Vorik's chest, the sound shaking the chamber. He leaped from his throne, his massive frame colliding with Cain in a blur of motion. The force sent Cain skidding across the stone floor, but he rolled with the impact, coming to a stop in a low crouch. Vorik towered over him, his crimson eyes burning with rage. "You think yourself unstoppable, human." His voice was a growl, reverberating through the walls. "You are nothing but flesh and bone. I am war itself." Cain exhaled, rising to his feet. His body ached, but pain was an old companion. It sharpened him, reminded him that he was alive. He wiped blood from his lip and met Vorik's gaze with something far worse than defiance. A complete lack of fear. "You talk too much," Cain said. Vorik lunged. He struck with the force of a meteor, fists the size of boulders hammering down. Cain dodged left, then right, barely avoiding a blow that cratered the floor beneath them. Vorik was stronger, heavier, an unstoppable force of nature. Cain didn't try to match him in raw power. He didn't need to. He just needed to be faster. Vorik swung again. Cain ducked low, rolling beneath the strike and coming up behind him. A knife appeared in his hand, its monomolecular edge gleaming. He drove it forward, only for Vorik to twist at the last second, catching Cain's wrist in an iron grip. "Did you truly believe it would be that easy?" Vorik sneered. With a single motion, he hurled Cain across the chamber. The human hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop near the base of the throne. His vision blurred for a fraction of a second before he forced himself up. Vorik was already closing in. Cain took stock. Zyros was still operational, his damaged limbs sparking as he recalibrated. The remaining warlords, wounded but standing, watched with wary eyes. The advantage of surprise was gone. Now, it was a fight of endurance. Vorik reached for him. Cain moved first. He launched himself forward, ducking under Vorik's outstretched arm and driving an elbow into the warlord's ribs. The impact was like striking reinforced steel, but it wasn't meant to be a killing blow. It was positioning. Vorik turned, just as Cain's other hand came up, pressing a small device against the warlord's exposed neck. A high-frequency pulse erupted. Vorik roared in pain, his nervous system momentarily disrupted. It was the opening Cain needed. He seized Vorik's massive arm, using the warlord's own momentum to twist and send him crashing into the stone floor. The throne room trembled under the impact. Cain didn't hesitate. He moved toward the nearest fallen warlord, retrieving a discarded weapon, a plasma rifle far more advanced than anything human technology had produced. He leveled it at Vorik's head. For the first time, the great warlord looked up at him with something close to disbelief. "This is impossible," Vorik growled. Cain's finger rested on the trigger. "Not impossible." His voice was calm, steady, just inevitable. The chamber held its breath. The warlords, their guards, the very walls of the fortress seemed to wait, frozen in the moment before execution. Then Zyros moved. His damaged systems whined in protest as he extended a single arm, activating a command sequence embedded in his neural core. Across the fortress, something rumbled. The floor beneath them vibrated, deep and ominous. Cain's eyes flicked upward. Above them, the ceiling split apart, revealing the vastness of space beyond. A planetary bombardment platform loomed above, its cannons shifting, locking onto the throne room itself. Zyros's mechanical voice crackled. "If we fall human, then you fall with us." Cain's grip on the rifle tightened. Vorik smiled, blood staining his teeth. "Your move, soldier." The fortress trembled as the orbital cannons powered up, their targeting systems locking onto the throne room. Cain had seconds. The warlords had chosen annihilation over surrender, and Zyros had ensured that if they fell, they would take him with them. Vorik grinned through blood-stained teeth, his massive frame rising despite the damage he had sustained. "You were never meant to leave this place, human," he growled. "Even you cannot outrun fire from the heavens." Cain's eyes flicked between the warlords, the rifle still steady in his hands. He could end Vorik now, erase the warlord from existence with a single pull of the trigger. But a dead warlord wouldn't stop the bombardment. Killing them all would still leave the station's automated systems to carry out its final directive: total annihilation. His mind worked fast. Options, escape routes, contingencies. The warlords had a way out, some emergency failsafe. A place like this didn't rise to power without its leaders having an escape route built into their fortress. The answer wasn't in killing them. It was in finding that escape and making sure they had no chance to use it. Zyros's remaining eye glowed coldly. "Your hesitation is wasted time, human." The machine warlord lifted a shattered limb, fingers twitching in a rapid sequence. A command, one final override. The countdown accelerated. Cain fired. The plasma bolt struck Zyros's head, melting metal and flesh alike in an instant. The machine warlord spasmed once before collapsing, his systems finally failing. But the damage was already done. The fortress's automated defenses had their orders. The countdown would not stop. Vorik snarled, lunging. Cain twisted aside, the warlord's massive fist slamming into the floor and shattering stone. He was slower now, wounded, but still powerful. The other surviving warlords hesitated, watching, weighing their chances. Cain didn't give them the time. He moved through them like a force of nature, striking, breaking, ending. He didn't kill for spectacle, didn't revel in the violence. Each motion was calculated, precise. a shattered knee to keep one from running, a crushed windpipe to silence another before they could call for reinforcements. Vorik was the last. The warlord staggered back, his chest heaving, blood dripping from a dozen wounds. His empire, his fortress, his very existence, all crumbling in the face of one man. Cain leveled a rifle at him. "The escape route," he said. Vorik spat blood. "I would rather die here." Cain fired, not at Vorik, but at the control panel embedded in the warlord's throne. Sparks erupted, and with a deep groan, a hidden passage revealed itself. A transport bay, sleek and reinforced, a vessel waiting within. The warlords had always intended to flee if the battle turned against them. Cain moved first. Vorik, wounded as he was, still had fight left in him. He lunged, but Cain was already inside the bay, already sealing the hatch. The warlord slammed into the barrier, roaring, eyes burning with fury. Then the fortress shook again. The orbital cannons had fired. Cain engaged the ship's engines. The vessel tore from its berth, rocketing through the fortress's underground launch tube and into the void beyond. Below him, through the ship's rear display, he saw the throne spire as the first plasma strike hit. A sun-bright explosion engulfed the structure, the shockwave ripping through its foundations. The warlord's empire, years in the making, ended in a flash of fire and collapsing steel. Vorik's final scream was lost to the void. Cain exhaled, his grip loosening on the controls. The war was over. The galaxy would never know his name, never know the single man who had walked into the heart of terror and shattered it. That was fine. The mission was complete, and Cain had never needed an audience.